You know what stops most purpose-driven entrepreneurs from building something that is truly significant? It's often this subtle but powerful lie that we tell ourselves that we aren't building a legacy and it's something that we are going to do later, right? Like after we have made it, after we have everything figured out. But what if I told you that building a legacy is not about what you leave behind, but rather what you're building right now? Remember a few episodes back when we talked about Solomon and building the temple? Well, I'm going to be circling back around to that because I have been sitting with this story for quite some time because I feel like there's so many layers that speak to building a business and building a legacy. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Solomon's story, let me paint the picture for you. So before I dive into today's podcast episode, I kind of wanted to point out a few things. First of all, thank you for bearing with me as I have figured out my setup and gotten everything going. I had a podcast mic and it just did me wrong. And so I had to get this new one and I have been figuring it all out. I do plan to go back and re-record some of the episodes, especially the audio episodes, just to save your ears. But I just wanted to call that out because I'm loving this new mic. It did take a second to get it all figured out, but I feel like it is so worth it for the audio that it produces. And also my camera settings, all of the things, it was just such a mess. And I'm trying to figure out what makes the most sense. So thank you for bearing with me as I'm figuring it out. But I wanted to dive deep into the story today about Solomon and just kind of give you a little bit of a backstory if you're not familiar with his story. So Solomon was King David's son and he inherited this kingdom. And what he did was not just inherit a kingdom, but he also inherited this divine assignment. And his father David dreamt of building this temple for God. And he received the plans, but he didn't have everything all figured out, right? Like God himself gave Solomon the plans, but he gave David the plans, but it wasn't David's assignment to complete. It was actually Solomon's. So in 2 Samuel, we see that God specifically chose Solomon for this task, but he was telling David that his son would be the one to build the temple or the house for God's name. And what's fascinating to me is how in this project, as it unfolded, everything kind of went in a direction that I'm sure that most of it Solomon didn't expect. So according to 1 Kings, Samuel was building this temple and he was in the 4th year of his reign. And what happened is that he was gathering all these materials from across the land, like the best types of materials, right? Like there was cedar from Lebanon. There was these skilled craftsmen from, I think the name of the place is Tyre. Anyway, essentially, he was just getting all of these materials that were the best of the best, like the best materials that you could possibly have. And he took on the construction. And the thing about this construction project is that it took so many years to complete, right? I think it took 7 years in total. And what you'll see is in Kings 1, all of the details and everything that was planned out, every element of everything was very purposeful. But what really strikes me in all of this is that Solomon spent 7 years building all of this, right? He was building the temple, the 13 years to, build this palace. There were 7 years that he was building the temple, and then there was 13 years that he was building this palace. And from there, Solomon was probably thinking that this was going to be his legacy, right? Like the temple was ultimately what ended up becoming his legacy. And because it wasn't about creating this magnificent building that, he was in charge of, even though that was a very important aspect of it, it was really about what he was doing that served God's greater purpose. And it not only served where they were at in this present moment, but in generations to come. And it got me thinking about how we approach business. Often it's from this lens of, we just got to get it done. The day-to-day tasks are really the most important thing. We're going through the motions and we just have to make it through the day. And, these things like client work or getting our systems set up and whatnot, they're all important things, right? But sometimes we lose sight of the very thing that we're building our foundation on. And we lose sight of that bigger picture, and every decision that we're making today, we forget that it's building something that will outlast us and will be the foundation for tomorrow's impact. And I can say from my own personal experience last year when I was getting ready for the development of building Brand Legacy Blueprint, I wasn't even in that mindset, right? Like I knew that I wanted to build something that lasted a legacy, but I knew that I also didn't have clarity for every aspect of it. And I realized that I had been building this success, but God was actually calling me for something more significant, something more than I had realized was more profound than what I had envisioned in my own mind. And there is this huge difference between the two, right? When you're building for success and you're building according to God's plan. And so the way that I think of it is like success asks, how can I grow my business, versus legacy that asks, well, how can I create an impact? And success often focuses on, the metrics like our quarterly or annual goals, whereas legacy focuses on generational impact, the long-term success of everything that we're doing, right? The impact that we're going to make. And success often is something that measures revenue versus legacy that measures in the lives that were transformed. And it was such a big thing to me when I realized this, because it shifted the way that I thought of my business on a whole. And I know that some of you are probably thinking like, Vanessa, how can I, I'm just trying to get my business off the ground, right? Like isn't it too early for me to be in this mindset of building a legacy? And I want to challenge you to shift that mindset today. There is this thing that I've learned as I've gone through, building my course, building a business, working with other business owners, is that legacy isn't this thing that's just like a phase of business. It's a way of doing business. And it's not about size or scale. It's essentially about how you're approaching your business with intention, with impact. The best example I could give in relation to the Bible is Ruth. She didn't know, when she was going through Boaz's field, that at that time she had this lineage that would be tied to Jesus, right? She had this massive thing, and she was being faithful in all of it and what was right in front of her. But in her, daily devotions, in her character and her faithfulness, all of these different components of who she was, they created this legacy that went far beyond any decision that she could have ever imagined or anything that she could have done. It was far beyond what she could have even pictured, right? Even envisioned. And I think that's probably the simplest way that I could look at your business or explain how to look at your business is through this lens of creating an impact, a long-term impact, not just for right now and trying to survive the day, but how can I get through and create this impact that is probably beyond what you're even thinking. And so here's what I would say in figuring out how it works. Like before you make any significant business decision, are you asking yourself this one question? How will this impact the people that I'm called to impact, not just for today, but for generations to come? So what am I doing today that is really going to impact lives, not just for right now, but for generations and years and years and years to come? So the way that this kind of works in practice is what we're doing in the Eden and Empire community is when I created this program structure, I did it with the thought of not just focusing on immediate results. I really pride myself on being different in the sense of there's a lot of programs out there that really are focused on let me get you something right now versus in the long run, right? Like I want people to build the sustainable, incredible business that doesn't just give you a quick fix, but I want it to give you results for years and years and years to come, like the impact that you're called to make. And so what we do is I built these frameworks that really serve the community in this capacity and helping people figure out who they're called to serve and how they're called to serve. And I just wanted to give that as an example because I feel like a lot of what we're doing in today's society is really focusing on let me get that quick fix. And what I would challenge you to do for today or for the near future is take a look at one aspect of your business and really figure out what is that signature thing that you're doing, whether it's your client processes or, what you're currently offering that can really make an impact beyond just what you're doing on the day-to-day. Like writing down your insights and using them essentially as a guide for your next steps. But ultimately, I really want you just to remember all of this. What you're doing is not just building a business. You're building this legacy that will impact generations. And every single decision that you make, every system, every client interaction, every single element of what you're doing in your business is sowing seeds of change. And if you're ready to dive into it a little bit deeper, I encourage you to first start by thinking, how can I impact generations, right? Like what can I do to widen my impact? But also it's something that I help in my Brand Legacy Blueprint course that I have. It's just one course that's self-paced that you can do it on your own. But in our Eden and Empire community, we're having these conversations every day, right? And I'll link it in the show note. But I just wanted to leave you with that. If nothing else, I wanted you to marinate on the fact that what you're doing has impact and it's so important. And next week, we're going to go into diving into more of building your business and how to create systems that help you to do it without losing who you are. But until Monday, I will see you guys.